February 20th, 2024, as presented.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Let's move into the committee and staff report in the residential development report. Anything to report there? Yeah, kind of thought that might be the case with nothing in it. So, well, let's move on then to agenda 5, number 5, which will need to recess the planning commission.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, I make a motion to recess the Planning Commission and convene the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you, Gary. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes. Let's move on then to agenda item 5.1. I now call agenda item 5.1, which is a public hearing on case BZA-V23-0014. We'd like to welcome everyone interested in this hearing and lay out a few ground rules. It's important that you present any facts or views that you have as evidence of this hearing so that findings may be made for the decision of this board. In order to grant a variance, 5 specific written findings of fact must all be met according to the state statutes and the city zoning regulations. This board is authorized by state statutes to make a decision appealable only to the district court and not to the governing body. After our zoning administrator provides us with some information, I will call on the applicant and we will hear from other interested parties. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The board will close the hearing to further public comments, and then we'll consider their decisions, during which time they may direct questions to the applicant, the public, or staff. You should be aware that the board can require such conditions to be attached to the premises benefited by the variance as may be necessary to comply with the standards set on Article 11.106. These are to reduce any potentially injurious effect of such variance upon other property in the neighborhood and to carry out the general purpose and intent of these regulations. Failure to comply with any regulations attached to a zoning permit for a variance shall constitute a violation of the regulations. You should also be aware that if the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in the zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Before we begin this hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have conflicts of interest.
None.
Anybody? No, none either. Official notice for this hearing was published in the City of Andover Municipal website on December 23rd, 2023, and notices were mailed to the applicant and 8 real property owners of record in the area of notification on December 22nd, 2023. The record shows that at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there is evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I will declare that proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the board if any of them have received any ex parte verbal or written communications prior to this hearing, which they would like to share.
No.
None.
I will now call on the city zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
Mr. Chairman, this is a rather unusual request. It's a request to build a building that's 3,300 square feet, which we really wouldn't consider to be large or out of character for the neighborhood. But the applicant proposes to place this on a lot that's just over 7,100 square feet. The property is in Old Original Andover up on Allison Street near the district stadium in an area that has a variety of lot sizes and configurations. And, you know, if you can imagine that the platting of this neighborhood goes back to 1880. So the way things were platted and the way buildings were built are vastly different than they would be under today's modern bulk regulations, very similar to the case you heard a month ago for the Redbud Trail project. The applicant in this case tells us that this building is to be used for personal use. We understand that that includes some events. That use would require additional zoning actions in order to hold events. Now, when we consider that application for the uses, we're also going to be talking about parking, which in this case, if the setbacks are reduced as is shown in the applicant's sketch, it leaves very little room for parking in front of or beside this building. I believe the applicant is in the audience tonight. We had held this case up to get more information so we better understand what his wishes are before we consider the variances requested.
Thank you, Les. Any questions of Les, first of all?
Les, do we have any examples in the city where a lot is about 50% covered by a building? Or would this be an exception? I know we typically have a percentage that we don't want to go over.
Sure. The typical lot coverage is going to be in the 25 to 35% lot coverage. In original Andover, those lots are much smaller, so you see higher lot coverage. Gary, if you can imagine the old volunteer fire station that's just down the road on Main Street, it's probably in the range of 50 or 60% lot coverage. Some of the houses that are on really small lots are going to be higher lot coverages, reduced setbacks.
Okay, thank you.
I'll now call upon the applicant to make his or her presentation on the request and in response to the zoning administrator's report.
My name is Chris Hagan. Live at 15050 East 24th, Wichita. I'm the contractor. First off, as far as like the events, by the meaning of that, it was more just like Andover football games. You might have a couple buddies come over and hang out before the game. It's not like an event, big party deal. It's just like a couple of people going over to hang out before the games only. It is for personal use. I don't know what all he's going to put in there. No commercial, no business, just kind of storing stuff basically. And then the reason for trying to build it bigger, I can show you pictures of like the buildings next to it. So they all look the same. They're metal buildings and they take up a lot anyways. So we're just kind of matching those. But there's no reason to mow a bunch of grass when it's a bunch of buildings next to each other. It's not like any housing or anything right next door to it. And then really we just kind of need to know how far off the street we're allowed to set the building back for parking. I mean, ideally they don't need enough for more than one car. And this thing says it does have a 12-foot right of way to the street and then the property starts. So I don't know how far back you need more from that section. I mean, if you go 25 feet and you go back to the property line, that can make a 52-foot building. But I don't know, what works for that. And really the sides, I mean, if we have to minimize the 60, if we could make the sides instead of 55, make it 60 to get a little tighter. There's no reason to mow, 10-foot strips along the side because it's surrounded by buildings. And if I can show you guys the pictures so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Can I come up there and show you guys or?
Sure. Is that beyond what we have here? It's like elevations?
Yeah, these are actual just
Oh, like elevations or?
Yeah, this is the building next to it. That's the lot, and you can see all the buildings are Exactly the same.
Yeah,
Here's your aerial. You guys can see the aerial right there.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is what the buildings look like. They're all.
Yep.
That's the lot, but it's all surrounded by the same
Style.
exact buildings.
Yep.
So. Sure. Yeah, so it's the same stuff. We're just, I mean, ideally the grass is just a waste, so the bigger the better for building to just match the rest of them.
Les, do you have any comments to his questions there on the setbacks and parking and everything?
He raised the question of what's necessary for parking. All of that parking needs to be off of the street right of way. So the key to this equation is how much parking is required. We're going to have to go through that exercise to determine what the use is, to determine how much parking is required, and then allot enough space for the required parking. Remember, we always have to look to the future as we make decisions that this applicant intends to use this building for his own personal storage. Tomorrow, he might decide to sell that, and the next owner has something different in mind and needs to comply with required parking.
So this building is 55 by 60 that's shown. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think we've seen the building yet.
It's in, it's not,
It's just like a hand sketch.
yeah,
It's not a,
it's a hand
Right,
sketch
I
there.
saw that,
Yeah, that's it.
but
more or less, we're
It's
just
not
trying
to
to
scale.
find how wide, how big can we go that's approved to build. And that's kind of an idea, but if we need to shrink it a little, if we can widen it a little, instead of being 10 foot, maybe be 6 foot off the sides.
Mhm.
Because that's, even the neighbors next to them is just wasted space. They just mow it, but there's nothing that it's used for.
Yep.
And that'll give you a little bit more parking.
Yep.
But I mean, a car says, 16 feet, and a truck is maximum of 22 with a hitch. So if you make it 25, and you got the 12-foot right away on top of that,
37.
now you're, what?
37.
37, yeah. So you're a long ways off the street.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Les? As far as the size of the size of the building is essentially stipulated. The parking is going to stipulate the size of the building, right?
Yes. It's difficult for me to land on what's an appropriate setback, not knowing what the required parking will be. Of course, we can give all these variances, but when it comes time for a building permit, we have to know what the use is and determine the parking and provide adequate space for parking.
So personal use with less than like 4 vehicles, what exactly does the staff need? A continuing discussion with the applicant?
Yeah, we need to know what that use is in order to determine the required number of parking spaces. And of course, there will need to be landscaping around those parking spaces, as well as the required yard for the site plan review. A lot of unanswered questions.
Well, based off the use being personal, how do you determine how many parking spots you need? Because I mean, if you look at the building next door to it, it doesn't have more than 4, and this can have 4 all right next to each other.
When you say the building next to it, are you talking to the
Well,
building
121 Allison, yeah,
to the
the one,
west?
yeah, the west.
Okay, so the applicant owns that building currently.
He owns that one too. Yeah.
I'm having trouble following you there. How would you accommodate 4 parking spaces in just 12 feet between the street right-of-way line and the face of the building?
No. The building's gonna be set back 20 or 25 feet from that 12 feet. So you can, so say this table's here's Allison, here's your 12 feet. Then you have 4 spots of parking and then your building starts. So they're all just stacked like this.
That's where I'm having trouble following you. There's a 10-foot easement at the rear.
Right.
Let's see if I can. This 10-foot utility easement at the back of the building, 10-foot side, 10-foot side. If you do the math, he's proposing a 60-foot building
Well-
with a 10-foot easement. That's 70. And that property dimension is 87. So that leaves 17 feet between the front of the building and the property line. The minimum size for a parking stall is 8.5 feet by 19 feet. And it's required to have a 3-foot landscape bed for screening around the parking spaces. So that's where I have trouble doing the math.
Well, I'll show you a drawing.
And if there is parking stalls in front of the building, is there a space from the front of the vehicle to the building that's required by any city code? Or they just going to take chances on somebody not bumping into the building?
That's typically 2 feet and you use some sort of a parking curb.
Okay.
12-foot right away, 20-foot parking, 57-foot building, and then a 10-foot easement. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4 cars
So how do you access those spaces?
from a drive right here.
You're only allowed 30 feet of driveway throat width. And what you're showing me there is that your spaces would be,
For 4 cars, that'd be
I mean,
32 feet.
if you
well,
assume 8
be
feet.
30, it'd be 34 feet for
Yeah.
8.5 foot spaces across the front of a 55-foot building. And we presume there's a overhead door to get in the building.
Mhm.
You can't park in front of the overhead door. So how do you get from that 30-foot driveway into these parking spaces that are either side of the driveway? Sorry, I'm diving down in the
No,
weeds. I'm diving down in the weeds, but
I mean,
you're asking for
no.
a lot here and I'm having trouble following how you're going to get there.
I guess, but I just need to know what we need for a drive to determine the building and what, if it's personal use, what's
You're,
the code is.
if you're showing me a 30-foot driveway, then how do I get off of that driveway to access these parking spaces that are,
I mean, you could park
Off
like
to the
this and
side.
park sideways.
you could,
So you could park, that's 10 and 10.
that's
Or-
8.5 by 19. That's
And then
38
you got an overhead door
feet.
right here.
38 feet of your 55-foot building. leaves you 17 feet for your driveway or your
For a garage
overhead door. That's a much more workable scenario to me than trying to park with the cars faced towards the building.
I get you. So is that doable with 4 spots?
I'm gonna have to do the math. We've got to talk about what the use is and then there's a table that tells us how many parking spaces are required.
Yeah, as soon as he says he wants to use it for events, how many individuals are going to be there? Is
Like
it
3
gonna
or 4?
just 3 or
Just like a
4?
couple of his buddies that are on the teams.
Okay, because I've seen in the past, the previous owner who had the property to the west,
Mhm.
Jeff,
Yeah, Jeff.
I think I met
Yeah.
him one time.
anyway, he opened up his building for tailgating. And that thing was absolutely loaded with people on the football games. And I live down Allison, and it's very tricky to get down Allison when there's a football game. And Jeff had his tailgating party there because people are crossing the street trying to get there, trying to find a place to park their car, and so it's just, it makes for a logistics nightmare.
I get the crossing the street sort of, but I mean, if it's a football game, those streets are packed anyways.
Yeah.
And people are going from their cars across the street. So I mean, personally, I just don't see it. It's whether that building has people in it or not, the traffic's still gonna be a lot.
Yeah, there's still going to be traffic, but when you say now we're having an event at that building, you've changed the whole scenario. As opposed to, it's just parking on both sides of the street for the football game. Yeah, pedestrians are going to be in the street, but as soon as you say we're having an event and it's going to be in that building, which might spill out into the parking lot because, is the building going to be heated, cooled? What are all the conditions on the building? Are people going to be in the parking lot like in the building to the west? You're kind of opening a can of worms. If you said, this is basically a storage shed that's only going to be used for storage. We need a driveway for a vehicle to come up to the overhead door and the vehicle will be inside the building. That's completely different.
I get you, I guess, but what's to say the next owner doesn't throw a tailgate? I mean, all those buildings are.
But if the next person decides to make it an antique mall,
Yeah, I mean, all I need to know is what we can do.
in that zone.
yeah,
I just want the biggest building we can do that you guys are gonna approve, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to argue against you.
No,
I just
no.
wanna know
And
what
we're
to
not
do
try-
so I can start building it.
And we're not trying to be the building prevention department. Probably feels like it, but that's not at all the case.
I
Um,
wanna do it right, I just,
Yeah, I get it.
the smaller you make the building, the less useful the space is, it's just
Yeah.
extra amount,
Sure.
is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
If we were to go by the existing rule of lot coverage, how big of a building could he put on that lot?
1,800 or something.
Be in the neighborhood of 2,000 square feet.
And the current one is 60 on this drawing.
3,300 is what he's shown.
So I think we need to decide that first.
It seems to me like there needs to be continued discussion between staff, don't you think, Les?
I think there are still some details that we need to agree on in order for you to make an informed
That's the way
decision.
it sounds to me.
You raised lots of good questions. Lots of good questions. And we're right now debating about changing what we're looking at. I would like to see what we are supposed to approve.
Right, you could only approve what's been advertised. You could approve less, but you can't approve more. For instance, he's asking to keep the required 10-foot side yards. You couldn't approve a 6-foot side yard because it wasn't advertised.
Understood.
So what if we keep the 55 and just shrink the 60?
There is a possibility for that.
Yeah, I think, Chris, what we need is a little bit more detailed drawing of what is being proposed. If there are going to be 4 vehicles out in front of the building for an event, where's the driveway? Where's the overhead door? How do you get access to those 4 stalls? And how does that affect the size of the building with 10-foot setbacks on the side yard and 10-foot on the back?
I mean, I can draw stuff, but then I'm going to come back again and then there's going to be more questions. Like I need to like sit down with someone and like, I just want to get it
We're
figured
happy to
out.
do that. So far, we've not had that
usually
opportunity.
Usually when people come, they've had additional communication with
So
staff.
this is where I'm annoyed because I've been talking to the Connor Boyd kid at the front and he's been no help. Like, I'm like, dude, let me talk to someone that can answer these questions. He's like, oh, well, I got to figure this out and talk to her. I'm like, just let me talk to someone. I just want to figure it out so we're done. And
Sure.
I know what I can do.
Sure.
And it's like pulling teeth to get the guy to, he's not letting me communicate with anybody. I asked last time because I missed this meeting because I had a little girl. And
Congratulations.
I was like, thank you. I was like, can I like talk to someone that can get some info so I'm ready for next time? No, none of the board members can talk to you. You'll just have to wait till the next meeting.
Huh.
And I'm just like,
Yeah, I'd be frustrated.
yeah, I'm just trying to
I'd be
get some
frustrated.
answers.
Yeah, I'd be frustrated if I was you too. I don't know what the deal is with Connor.
I'm happy to sit down and
Just-
work through these
You did work
details.
directly with Les. I'm sorry that it's taken another 4 weeks, but
Yeah.
Les knows everything.
Yeah, I mean, I just asked whoever I can talk to, just
Yeah.
let me talk to someone.
Yep.
So Les, when we're talking about process I mean, if they have to go for a zoning change before they know what they can really do in this building, right? I mean,
Sure.
I'm not
Sure,
asking a question, but I guess
I've
thinking
kind of picked up some cryptic bits of information about the use over the past 60, 90 days that we've been looking at this application. It wasn't until recently that I learned that the applicant intended to use it for events. Well, what does event mean to me? Event means
It's
a gathering of people.
it's mostly car storage. He's gonna have a bunch of cars there. He collects cars. The more, that's what people do with their money.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't really put a ton of people in there when he's collecting nice cars, because I know he does not want those damaged. So it's not. An event's not the right word. And I was talking to Connor. I was like, I just want it zoned the exact same as the one that they own and just build another building.
Yeah.
And Connor's like, oh, I was like, he's going to show his cars and maybe some people come over to the game. Oh, perfect. Put that in your email to send them. That's what they want to hear. That's exactly what he told me. I'm like, I'm just wanting the same building, same zoning. How big can I make it? That's all I want.
Yeah, I'd be frustrated too. Sorry.
So, yeah.
So Les has said right here that he's willing to work with you on what needs to be done. Again, I'm sorry for the delay in this. We're not trying to be the bullying prevention
No, I
department.
know. I just want same as his other building,
Sure.
whatever
Just want to know what you can
code
do.
requirements you're requiring on that one. That's
Sure.
what I want to do.
Okay. Any more questions for the applicant? No. Thank you.
So I meet with him and then we got to do this next month again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So,
Ugh.
sorry about that, Chris.
No, I
Yeah,
know.
It's not what we want either.
Yeah.
No, I know. It's a
Mr.
interesting deal.
Chairperson, I'd make a motion that we table this discussion until after the applicant and his contractor have had an opportunity to sit down and discuss issues with Les Mangus, with the city, and to get a better idea of exactly what the building's going to be used for, how parking will be addressed, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you, Gary.
I second that.
Sounds good.
You have a second? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes.
I get your number.
It's 9.
Mr. Chairperson, I'd make a motion that we adjourn the Board of Zoning Appeals and reconvene the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thanks again for coming. All right, let's move on to the Red Bud Trail final PUD. Any updates on this, Les?
Sure. Subdivision Committee looked at this final planned unit development plan. Staff has reviewed the plan, worked with the applicant's agent to make a few minor changes to get everything in conformance with the subdivision regulations. And we're happy to report that we recommend approval. Phil Myers here on behalf of the applicants. If you all have any questions that we haven't answered to this point.
Thanks, Les. We've seen this numerous times over the last several months. Any questions for Les?
Yeah, Les, if we were to approve this, then this would go to site plan review, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Phil, do you have anything you want to add? Okay.
Have we raked you over the coals?
He's just ready to be home on a Tuesday night. Well, I'd entertain a motion on this one, unless you guys have additional questions.
I think we've all seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've discussed this quite a bit. I think it's going to be a great thing. So
Yeah.
I'd be happy to make a motion that we, let's see, let me get to the right,
I know, I had to find it.
the right portion, that we approve the Red Bud Trail final planned unit development plan.
Thank you for the motion, Gary. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion at all? Sometimes I forget that part. All those in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Phil, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you coming to all the
Yeah, you're a fixture
subdivision
these days.
meetings
Yeah.
and really walking us through everything and working with staff. I think that's very important and you've done a wonderful job on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks again. All right, let's move on to item 5.3 then. Zoning amendment on 1413 East Highway 54.
This is a recommendation on a case that was submitted to the Butler County Community Development Office. Because of timing issues with the county's schedule and the city's schedule, we oftentimes receive things at the last minute. So is the case in this. We put it on your agenda yesterday when we found out about it late on Friday. This is a case that's very close to the city. Fact of the matter, it's surrounded by the city on three sides. It's right on Highway 54, within a rock throw of the YMCA. It falls within the Andover Comprehensive Plan, which includes future land uses. It falls within the extraterritorial jurisdiction for subdivision activities. So we kind of took a dive into what the applicant requested, which is a commercial zone in the county's regulations, which really don't align with the place types that our comprehensive plan suggests, nor do they really align with the existing uses around the subject property. The county's commercial zone is a little bit more intense big yards for ag equipment sales or construction or ag fertilizer or whatever. So we looked at the county's comprehensive plan, and there's a clause in their own comprehensive plan that says anytime a property is within, they called it the gradient, which is that area not currently in a city, but within the city's comprehensive plan area, that before any development happens, that property should be annexed and zoned by the city. So staff's recommendation on this one is that the county isn't really the proper venue for this change, that it should come back to the city as a zoning case for one of our zones. It should be platted. It currently has public utilities available. There's a sewer line in proximity. There's a water line in proximity, but the right venue for commercial activity is in the city, not an island of the county within the city.
Looks like part of this, the reason for this change is to maximize value for resale,
Sure.
it appears. I think it was in the application.
I've tried to reach out to the county's director of community development. I wasn't able to reach him, but we'll talk about it in the near future. I'm glad that he did reach out to us and forward us the opportunity to comment on the case.
That Ag 40 normally entails 40 acres too, doesn't it? It's really
That-
strange.
So there is a long history at Butler County, gosh, as much as 15 years ago, of changes to their zoning regulations. And when they changed their zoning regulations, they would reset the zoning of virtually every parcel in the county to Ag 40. So you'll see that zone on small parcels way below 40 acres out in the county. But it's because they were reset after they were developed, and they exist as a legal non-conforming use.
How did this not ever get annexed in? If, I mean, it literally is,
It's actually, it's in our group of parcels in and surrounding the city that are on the staff's plate for annexation in the near future.
okay.
The city has just kind of grown around this, and some past governing bodies were very passive to annexation. These properties didn't petition for annexation. The city just existed around them. The current governing body wants to square up those boundaries and make sure that every parcel like this that's surrounded by the city comes into the city.
Good. Any more questions for Les?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. The 1425 East Kellogg, Andover says it's a single-family residential home. Is that correct?
1425.
It's right there in that little crook of the L
Directly to the
Mhm.
west, right?
to the east.
East, sorry.
That's right.
There is a single family home there, yes.
Okay. And
I don't know if it's occupied.
is that home, I can't quite tell, is that home in the city limits?
Looks like it is.
I believe that one is, yes.
So it jogs around that home and then goes down,
Yes.
and the city limits is half the house, well, the houses on the west side of Highland Drive are in the city. Those
Yes.
that are on McCandless, those are not in the
They're
city.
not in the city, as well as the feed store is not in the city.
Any plans in the future to annex that strip to
That-
square everything up?
That's on my list of things to do this year.
Okay.
I've got the required annexation report about 50% complete. It's a pretty tedious process for a city to unilaterally annex a parcel.
Yeah.
To annex it without the owners petitioning to be annexed.
We've had cases in the past where the city wanted to annex areas and the people didn't want to be annexed, but they were receiving city
Sure,
services.
sure. Just, you remember the bicentennial area on the north side of the highway, directly north of this parcel. It was unilaterally annexed because the city had grown around it. Public services were available, and it was virtually an island within.
And that's kind of what we've got right here.
Yes, yes,
I can't-
this one is next on our list of unilateral annexations.
Okay, thank you.
Seems pretty straightforward to me. Unless there's more discussion, I'd sure listen to a motion. Or I can even make it.
I was gonna say, I can make
Go
it.
for
I
it.
was just reading because it's big.
Yeah. Go for it.
So, Marla Canfield recommend that the Butler County Planning Commission disapprove the application to change the zoning district classification of the subject property from existing AG 40 agricultural zoning district to the commercial district, that the applicant be instructed to petition for annexation into the city of Andover and seek a change of zoning in conformance with the Andover Unified Development Manual and Comprehensive Plan as required by the Butler County Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I, Gary Israel, second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Member items? I have one along lines with annexation. What about, we've talked about this before, like the block building just north of the Butler Community College bill at 21st and Hanover Road, and some of those that are outside the city limits still, that are usually a mess.
That's currently number 3 on that list,
Okay.
but likely to be moved to number 2.
Okay.
That one
I drive
house
by
is
that twice every day,
dangerous,
at least twice a day, yeah.
with all the stuff that is piling up behind it.
There's one person owns all that, right? Like 3, 4, 5 houses. It amounts to 10 or 15 acres right there, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay,
I have a question.
sure.
On the corner of 159th and Central, there's Landmark Capital, Landmark Commercial signs just popped up.
Hmm.
It's on the Sedgwick County side. Do we have any idea what's going on there? Didn't think so. Just thought I'd ask.
Hmm.
Just over the border.
I know the owner of that property. He owns a lot of land in the Andover area. It's on the market for the right buyer.
Central and 159th?
Yes.
Visualizing it.
Yeah, and I see that there's ground or dirt work being done at the apartments there in the Green Valley area.
I just met with the developer of those apartments this morning, and he told me he intends to break ground for grading the pad for the apartments around April 20th and be in construction shortly thereafter. What you're seeing there today, Gary, is grading for the Founders Parkway public street.
Anything else?
Just driving in, boy, the park
Yeah.
is full
Yeah.
this evening. Great weather brings everybody out, and it's just great to see individuals from Andover and other communities that are coming to enjoy the amenities here in the city.
I agree.
Who would have thought that when Bob Kaplan and I negotiated the purchase of this property and the property for the school campus back in 1998-ish?
What was the name of the Girl Scout camp? I know,
Camp Seekawak.
yeah, Sequoia. cookies spelled backwards.
right? When we bought the property, there was not a men's room on the property. And the toilets were child size.
Progress.
It's funny.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you.
I do have a question.